Minister and her officials. And prior to going into the individual item under debate, the usual citation applies in relation to speaking about those outside the House and who might be identified by speeches as being the person referred to. We avoid such instances, and with that, we will. On purpose of the meeting, any member acting in substitution for a member of the committee should formally notify the clerk now, if they have not already done so. That's the distinction between the select committee and an ordinary committee meeting, where in actual fact in an ordinary committee meeting the person automatically announces to the committee before it starts that he or she is replacing somebody for the duration of the committee meeting. So that's done. And we start with the bill, the Credit Union Amendment Bill 2022 and Section 1. Anybody wish to comment on Section 1? Minister?
Thank you. Section 1 and 2.
No
I think
there's
no. Yeah, it's simply as is. It's the standard section. It's no amendments to that.
Okay. Okay.
There's a sir.
Agreed. That Section 1 stand part of the bill. Great. Section 2. No amendments. Section 2. That Section 2 stand part of the bill. Agreed. Section 2. That Section 2 stand. Section 3. In the name of Antara. 1, 19, 24, 26 to 38 inclusive, 47, 49 and 50 are related and will be discussed together. Antara.
I move Amendment 1 and the amendment, as you say, is grouped with all of the amendments in Group 1, and the grouping addresses the following issues collectively. Expanding the definition of an officer of a credit union to include a member of the appellate body, which is referred to in Section 37. Changes to the functions of the board to remove some of the administrative and operational tasks from the board to allow it to focus on strategic planning and development. Technical amendments to clarify and tighten the language of the Credit Union Act in relation to the following areas: the board structure, makeup and governance of credit unions and corporate credit unions, reporting to the Credit Committee, some modernisation of the language of the Credit Union Act, election of the Board Oversight Committee, the eligibility of a CEO to be appointed to the Board of Directors, reporting rule changes to the Central Bank, compliance reporting to the Central Bank, decisions made by the Board in relation to some additional services, the makeup of the Nomination Committee and the functioning of a corporate credit union.
Yeah, I have no problem with the group of amendments, and obviously welcome the legislation as well. I do have an issue in relation to amendment number 1, as the way it's drafted will create problems in terms of the bill. So I would ask that the Minister withdraw amendment number 1 and submit a reworded amendment at report stage in relation to that amendment.
The amendments are fine. The thrust of this, I think, is to try to free up boards, members' time to focus on strategy, as well as involve the offices a lot more. I think that makes total sense to me, and I think the general thrust of this proposed bill is around trying to strengthen the work of our credit unions, strengthen the roles that they have, the services they provide, but also I think making it somewhat more encouraging for new additional board members, because there's a lot of work involved in being a board member of a credit union. We've seen that over the last probably 10, 15 years. A lot of commitment, a lot of work, a lot of training, a lot of CPU, which is fine. But I think anyway we can refocus it slightly to put more time into direction and strategy and developing services and reaching out to the community more is beneficial. So I think overall these changes, I think I would totally agree with most amendments as well. Some of them are technical in nature. So yep, full support on that.
Thank you. Antara.
Deputy English is right. There is a lot of this which are technical in nature. The purpose of that is the Deputy Doherty raised is to allow additional expertise to be placed on the board. That is the purpose of it. As you said, is getting more and more streamlined, more and more professionalised to be able to bring in that expertise where necessary or appropriate. And the broad thrust of this is to provide the best enabling environment for credit unions to make their own decisions thereafter. That the different credit unions are going to, by definition, definition of their size, by definition of their desire to take different approaches, and we're simply trying to provide the best enabling environment in consultation with all of the representative groups in the Central Bank who have worked in a very collaborative way on this piece of legislation. So that's the purpose and that's the approach that we've tried to take at every instance.
Thank you.
Just on amendment number 1, Minister, I think it's important that you withdraw that amendment and resubmit it at report stage with the correct numbers. The amendment, if it were to be passed today, would make this section confusing, but serious problems. It deletes lines 23 to 35. There is no line 35 in this legislation, for a start, in relation to page 5. But it would actually delete the definition of company, corporate credit body and public body, and then it would go on to state what a public body is, but without the definition. I think there's an issue in terms of the drafting of this amendment, and as I said, I support the spirit of it. I don't think it can be amended here in committee as is, but there is an issue in relation to, I suppose that the correct is to substitute 25 for 35, and I think it would probably read accurately then. I may be misguided, but I think if you pass this now, we'd have an issue in terms of this section, and maybe the best thing to do is withdraw it and put it in report stage with the 25, because otherwise you're going to delete the definitions, which I would imagine you intend not to delete, and therefore makes the section not just confusing, but does not allow for the definition of public body.
Yeah, Deputy Director, we have no difficulty working collaboratively. Very happy to deal with any issue of that kind at report stage. We didn't see it in the same way, and we're very, very happy to go back and look at that. That's been the whole essence of this bill, is collaboration.
Yep, perfect.
Yep.
So, Section 3, Amendment 1 is the arrangement in relation to Amendment 1 agreed. Agreed.
That it'll come back at we'll bring it back.
Yeah.
We'll withdraw and we'll bring it back at report stage. Yeah.
I asked the clerk beforehand, is there an option to amend this at committee stage now? Just, there's not? No. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Perfect.
So it's coming
agreed.
back at report stage anyway.
Yeah.
That's agreed. Amendment 2 on Tara. 2 to 7, inclusive, are related and will be discussed together.
Okay, forgive me. Yeah. Sorry, Chair, this is my first time dealing with the committee stage of this. Excuse me, in the grouping. Yeah. So Amendment 2, so that amendment is grouped with all of the amendments in Group 2, and the grouping addresses the following issues: the expansion of the definition of common bond to include the common bond of a corporate credit union, modernisation of the language in the Credit Union Act regarding the objects and purpose of a credit union, the establishment of a corporate credit union and the definition of its common bond, provision for credit unions to provide either a description or a map of its common bond on its website. That's the broad thrust of that set of amendments.
Agreed? Agreed. Amendment 2, and with reference to 2 to 7, agreed. So I still have to put the question that Section 3 as amended stand part of the bill. Is that agreed?
Yeah, just on Section 3 now, if that's okay. So there's only a couple of sections in this bill that I would like to speak to, because obviously we're all in, I can only speak for our own party, but I assume that members of the committee are all in support of this legislation, and it's very timely and worthwhile, and I know the credit union sector support it as well, and I know that there's been a lot of work gone into between yourself and your officials as well, and that's to be commended. Just as we go on to different sections, we'll look at how you apply for registration with the central bank, but can you clarify just in relation to a corporate credit union when it is when it's applying to be formed, just stepping through the application process, and particularly from a bank point of view, from a central bank point of view, can you clarify maybe the steps that will take place? And if the question is maybe a wee bit confusing, if it could be provided to us in writing before report stage, that might be helpful as well, just in terms of just the steps that the new corporate credit union would apply, but most importantly the central bank, because there has been friction there in relation to the central banking and the credit union movement in the past, and just the steps and the understanding in terms of your understanding of the legislation as to how a corporate credit union would step through this process and the timelines that may apply.
Tara.
I can't at this stage because it is a regulatory matter for the central bank to set that out, so it would be premature for me to do that. There is obviously, we have been working, as you know and as you've referenced, with the central bank very collaboratively with this piece of legislation, on every aspect of that. But it is then for the central bank to set regulations around the processes around that. So I can't answer the Deputy's question on this occasion because it is for the central bank to answer it, and I therefore can't do it before report stage either. What I would say is that the central bank is very open to engagement in relation to this. Will be open to consultation in relation to this, and I would encourage the Deputy to have that dialogue with the central bank. Indeed, we can do everything we can to facilitate any of that. But I can't do that, certainly not today, and certainly not in advance of report stage, because it is a matter for the central bank. The Deputy is correct to identify, as he has said, that there has been questions with the central bank. It's really important to highlight that alongside this legislation, we are enhancing, a stakeholder forum for credit unions with the central bank, that this is an ongoing conversation that's happening in tandem with this legislation. It's really important to highlight that, because you're quite correct to identify some of those issues, but I can't address them in the legislation.
No, that's fair enough, and we recognise the independence of the central bank in relation to their functions and performance of their duties in terms of regulation and supervision. And there has always been a kind of question in relation to the credit union movement and nearly a memorandum of understanding between both to understand the process. And as we develop a new process in legislation, I think it's really important, because I know officials from the central bank will be listening in, it's really important that there is a clear understanding between all parties, both the central bank and the credit union movement, as to what is expected, the timeframes that are allowed, and how to resolve any potential issues that may arise during this process, because it's important that there is a seamless there. So look, the stakeholder forum is really important, but I just wanted to use the opportunity of this legislation to make that point. Minister, thanks.
I think I should.
Damien English.
Yeah, Chair, just to add to that, I think any conversation we can have around that developing relationship, but I think probably the trust of this piece of legislation over the last couple of years, and certainly all the conversations around it, has been around strengthening that relationship between the credit union movement, the central bank, the department. And you can see, even in the last probably 12, 18 months, certainly in the last 12 months, that relationship seems to have developed a lot. And I think this legislation facilitates that. I think the forum and the memorandum of understanding will help that as well and enhance it, because I think it's clear from Piers' comments, my own comments, Minister, your own comments regularly around this. This is what we all want. We want to recognise and strengthen the role of the credit unions and make it a lot easier to do their work, while all the transparency, all the rules and regulations are absolutely there. But it's a relationship we want to develop to enhance, which I think is the whole aim here of this legislation and previous, is to enhance how our credit unions are working, who they can reach, who they can serve, and provide more services to their existing members, community members, but also to those who might miss out because of where they live, or if they're an SME or something like that. So that's the trust of it. I think our own desire here is that the central bank, which I think being part of this, and I understand from listening to yourself talking about previous as well, that the central bank have been fully much behind this as well and these changes, and that's positive. But we want to at all times recognise that, because I remember the days going back 10, 11 years ago when it wasn't always the healthiest relationship, and we want to strengthen that every opportunity we can.
Thank you.
May I just respond? I think both deputies are correct, and the memorandum of understanding is being drafted between the central bank, the Department of Finance, and indeed CUAC. And CUAC have a very strong role to play in this at all stages. Obviously, you'll be aware that the ICERN review is ongoing at the moment, and this central bank piece